It's Wednesday morning, and we have moved on to the Cincinnati Bengals, the defending AFC champion Cincinnati Bengals. Who would have thought last year that maybe at this time last year that we would be saying that now? The defending AFC champion Cincinnati Bengals. Had you put money on the Bengals last year at this time, you made quite a bit if you bet on them to win the AFC championship. I had money on them in October, had them in the Super Bowl, had the Rams. It was a good year for me. We're trying to duplicate that, and we're going to try to help you here on bet.nola.com, powered by the Datitude Podcast. And today is day 18 of 32 with our team previews. How you like the new backdrop, by the way? It's still a work in progress. Working on it. All right, when you talk about the Bengals, obviously, the first name that comes to mind, especially here in southern Louisiana, if you're watching here in southern Louisiana, is Joe Burrow. And the role that he played last year, coming back from that ACL injury, he made it look easy. And Jamar Chase, who looked so bad in the preseason, dropping balls, and people were worried about whether he was going to be a good receiver. Well, guess what? Jamar Chase turned out just fine, and he ended up being the number one receiver that a lot of people thought that he would be. It's hard to believe that he's come all this way from Archbishop Romo High School. But Jamar Chase is now a number one receiver in the NFL. No doubt about it. If you drafted in fantasy, you're certainly going to treat him that way. So when I was going into these Bengals, what I was looking at is to see, like I do with every team, not just we talk about how the schedule is the most important thing, but we talk about the improvements this team has made. And maybe the Bengals got to their need, their biggest need, better than any other team in the NFL, and that's their offensive line. And you talk about the first offensive lineman that they were able to bring on, and that's Lyle Collins from the Cowboys. Now, what he's going to provide is some significant upgrade over what the Bengals have had over last year. And Joe Burrow running for his life. Remember, he was sacked 9 times in a game. Lyle Collins is going to help with that. And not only that, they bring in Ted Karras from the New England Patriots. He is going to be not only the big force they need on the offensive line at center, but he is going to be a team leader because that's what centers do. And he's certainly going to fill that role and help the Bengals. They also get Alex Kappa from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who is going to play on the right side of the line at guard. And he is going to be a major factor as well. So obviously the Bengals have shored up their offensive line, and now can their offense move from a top 15 spot, which is just mediocre? Boy, did they come on the last half of the year. I think they're ready to take that momentum and move it forward with the protection that they have, with a healthy Joe Mixon, with a solid receiving core, because it's not just Joe Mixon who can fill that role at running back and has done an outstanding job. And he's obviously a top 2 or 3 round back in fantasy football. But you talk about T. Higgins as your number 2 receiver. T. Higgins took a big leap forward last year. He's ready to take on a number 2 role. And then, of course, Tyler Boyd and his role. Now, what worries me a little bit is I'm not the biggest fan of Zach Taylor. Zach Taylor as coach did a good job. But there were some things that were lacking. And it just worries me a little bit that the Bengals were in so many close games, and everything that could go right for them went right on their road to the Super Bowl. It even happened in the playoffs. You think about it, they should have been out when they played Vegas in the wild card round. Then they move on to Tennessee, and they have to get 3 turnovers in the game. Made Ryan Tannehill look silly in the game. They escaped Tennessee, and then Kansas City coming off that big game against the Buffalo Bills in the divisional round. They beat Kansas City in the championship. Obviously, Kansas City got out to the big lead. Bengals were able to come back. You look at the win totals for this team, and last year, obviously, they overachieved. We had them at 5-12, but by October, we were buying in. I wasn't sure about Joe Burrow and his health going into the season. It didn't take me long to make me a believer out of this team. And so this year, they're at 9.5. Seems awfully low for a team that went to the Super Bowl last year and made all these improvements. I'm going to liken them to the Saints a little bit. Making all these improvements in such a low number, what does Vegas see that the rest of us don't? Because I'm going to be honest, and I don't want to give a spoiler just yet, but that number seems awfully low to me, even though you have to pay a significant amount of juice. Let's take a look at their schedule real quick. And you get to the schedule, and look, they better win a bunch of these games early. And that's what we're counting on. If you're going to bet the Cincinnati Bengals over, you're counting on them to jump out to an 8-2, 9-2, 8-3 kind of start. Because you look at who they play early on: Pittsburgh, at Dallas, at the Jets, Miami. A good chance to be 4-0. I mean, realistically, they almost have to be 4-0, right? If you slip on one of those games, you're going to have to win a game maybe you're not supposed to win. Maybe at Baltimore, maybe at the Saints, because then you think they should be able to beat Atlanta at home. And then they go to Cleveland. We don't know yet, as of this recording, whether Deshaun Watson will be there or not. That would be the game. Let's see. That would be his second game back if the 6-game suspension holds now. So their first game against Cleveland, supposedly Deshaun Watson's going to be back. I don't think so. I think it's going to get changed. I don't think Deshaun Watson's going to be going a whole season. We'll get to Cleveland tomorrow, but I also don't think he's going to be around that early in the season. And then it gets a little easy again. Carolina, at Pittsburgh, in between the bye week. But then is when the super tough part comes. And so if they can find a way, again, to be 9-2, 8-3, somewhere along those lines by the time they get into that tough stretch of at Tennessee, Kansas City, Cleveland, probably with Deshaun Watson by then, at Tampa Bay, at New England, Buffalo. Obviously, that stretch is going to tell the tale for the Cincinnati Bengals and whether they're going to win or not. I'm going to take the over. This is one of those teams that I went in thinking beforehand, I was thinking they're going to regress. And if you read my blog, you know how I feel about that. I thought they were going to regress, but when you look at the schedule and the improvements they made on the offensive line, I think 9.5 is a clear bargain. I don't love the other numbers. I don't love the division total. I certainly don't love the conference in the Super Bowl, even though at plus 2,200, it seems like a value, but I don't really think that it is. I think the Bengals will eventually win a Super Bowl with this core group. I just don't think it's going to be this year. I think the AFC is way tougher than the NFC, and I think that there are at least 2 or 3 other teams I would rather take in the AFC that have better value than the Cincinnati Bengals team. However, again, I do like the over. I'm going to go with it, but that doesn't mean our expert's going to go with it. Let's see what he has to say. Moving along on this Wednesday morning with the Cincinnati Bengals, as we always do here on bet.noah.com, our NFL preview rolls on, and we have Adam Chernoff of Covers.com to probably tell me I'm wrong, because I don't even like this one. I got to be honest. I'm definitely not sold on my pick here. You know, the Bengals come in, and I was all set to say there's no way they're going to be as good as they were last year. They got the third toughest schedule in the NFL. They've got by far the toughest schedule in this division, which they should. You look at their numbers, the 13th on offense last year. They were 18th on defense. But that being said, and I don't like Coach Zach Taylor at all. I think he overachieved immensely. But what they do have is they have a guy named Joe Burrow who just seems to find ways to make things happen. I don't love the over. Again, I'm not sure it's a play for me. The 9.5 is the number. You got to pay big juice, kind of like with the Ravens at minus 135 to take the over. But I would probably take it. I think this team is going to be good again. I got them at 11-6. That might be a little high, but I still think because they're early part of their schedule, I think they really could be 5-0 by the time they come to New Orleans if they can beat Dallas. That's their biggest game in the first 5. I like the over with the Bengals, and I think they find a way to win this division again.
I'll stay. I'm neutral on the Bengals. It's a tricky team because, as you mentioned, so Zach Taylor, I think you're a little bit harsh on him for the offensive mind that he has and how he's proven to be able to execute that within this team. Obviously, really good receivers, really good quarterback, as you mentioned. The one weakness they had last year was the offensive line. They fixed that in a massive upgrade across the board. So that big weakness is now a strength. Where I'm stuck with this is, as you mentioned, there was overachievement. Last year, I believe they were favored in 3 games. You'll have to check. It was 3 or 4 games total. Now they're favored in 15. The win total went way up. The Super Bowl odds, way up. Like, massive difference this year versus last year from a price point perspective. And as you mentioned, last year, they were one of the biggest overachievers in a lot of year-over-year long-term metrics. So price is my problem. I'm not running to go under because they fixed a lot of the issues. This would be a team normally I would love the under. if they still had those issues, but they fixed it. And so I'm like, on one hand, you have the numbers that I really trust that say go way under. But on the other hand, there's sort of the eye test and the talent that says this team is going to be just as good. So tough one. I think the price is right. For me, it's a stay away.
Talk about their offensive line, and you look and Lyle Collins from Dallas. They get Ted Karras, who I think is a major upgrade at center, and then they get Kappa from Tampa Bay, and they have a couple of guys that were banged up that I think could be good again. I mean, I think their offensive line, they go from being maybe the worst offensive line in the league to maybe top 10, maybe.
Even if it's just average or better. I mean, it's such a significant increase. It'll go a long way. And so that's it's the only thing that's keeping me off and under here is that it's just the biggest weakness is now a strength.
Lastly, does their defense worry you at all? I mean, the 18th last year, I'm not sure that they got that much better on defense.
But you match that with how good these offensive weapons can be, and that's good enough to make a playoff run, as we saw last year. So it's a tricky team, but I think the price is pretty accurate for who they are.
Speaking of tricky teams, tomorrow we've got the Cleveland Browns. That is a tricky team.
There's a lot going on in Cleveland.
We'll talk about it tomorrow. Adam Chernoff, thank you.